Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of How I Double. My name is Pete Quist and this is the show where we take a look at businesses that have doubled their turnover within the last 2 years. We break it down to the 5 most contributing factors to their success and hopefully teach them so that you can implement them into your business as well. Well, leaving a cushy corporate job is often one of the most difficult things an entrepreneur can face. And today's guest did exactly that with just $1,000 in her bank account and only one client on a 3-month retainer. Well, a few years later and after the birth of her second child, the business wasn't going too far, growing very quickly at that point. But today's guest decided to kick her PR company into overdrive and now has a business that turns over in excess of $400,000 per year and only works 3 or 4 days per week. From Bespoke Communications, please welcome Amber Daines. Amber, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So first of all, let's get started. What does Bespoke Communications actually do?
So I'm a PR and media training consultancy. So we service clients at the big end of town, big corporates, as well as entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs within organisations, as well as political leaders and others who might want to get their message across either to the media or within a presentation environment, but don't know quite how to do that.
Okay, great. And whereabouts are you based? Where is the reach of your clients?
My clients are actually national, and I actually have a couple of overseas clients as well, which is fantastic. But I'm based here in Sydney, and beyond that, I tend to travel for clients. So I will go to them, and I do training with them, and often, that's fantastic, and it takes me to all sorts of interesting places all around.
So this is not a brand spanking new business. You're well established. So tell us a little bit about how the business got started and what were you doing before the business did start in 2007?
So at that point, I had a full-time job in a marketing and sponsorship role. At the time, I'd left a corporate job and was working in a not-for-profit for a year and a bit. And I was really working out what was next. And I just decided one day, it was heading towards Christmas, end of year, what do I want? What are my goals for 2008? And at that time, I realised I was just going to give this a go. So I quit the full-time job, had one person who I knew, a warm lead, who became my first retainer client. And the idea was really just freelance over the summer. Let's see what happens. And from here, I really became what I like to term the accidental entrepreneur. So I never went back to working for anybody else. And 8 years later, now the business is where it is today.
So would you describe it wasn't kind of a boots and all dive in at the deep end? It was more a soft approach. Like you said, you just took a bit of time out over Christmas just to see how things would establish. Is that how it worked?
Definitely. I mean, my background is I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. Both my parents have always had full-time jobs, very much that baby boomer security job for life mentality. And in some ways, I imagine when I started my journalism career 20 years ago, I was always going to be employed by someone. So for me, it was really a bit of a leap of faith. And I think I just got a taste of it. I loved the flexibility. I enjoyed meeting different clients. And really the control and the nimbleness that a business allows you was something which I couldn't imagine not having these days.
So tell us a little bit about your journalistic background.
So I started off my career about 20 years ago in print journalism for newspapers, a national newspaper, covering all sorts of things, interviewing politicians through to covering derivatives and everything in between. And then I got an opportunity to work in Hong Kong and then London. And that was fantastic. And back then in the late 90s, the dot-com era was just sort of starting. And so I worked for an online publication in the arts and got to travel around Europe and to New York and all sorts of places covering auctions for the arts market. And then in the early 2000s, I came back to Australia and joined a big PR agency. So I moved from journalism into public relations and worked for a number of agencies for a number of years. I've also worked in government, not-for-profit, and now here I am today running Bespoke Communications.
And what made you think you could make a success of a business?
I think it was just the idea. So many people said I had skills which lots of people would need and kind of gave me the confidence. And back then I didn't even know what a mentor was or a business coach or any of those tools which I now use and people that I align myself with. But back then it was really about okay, maybe I do have some special skills and a point of difference in the way in which I work with clients that it's going to really allow them to feel like they want to keep coming back to me and refer me on to other people.
But it's one thing to have the support of people around and people saying, oh, Amber, you've got these skills that people want and need, but they're not the ones that are paying the bills.
At the end of the day, it was interesting. A lot of people ended up saying, yes, we want to work with you. And a lot of my former clients from big agencies, when they heard that I was actually out on my own, they would actually come and work with me. And I was a little bit taken aback because I thought, well, they're going to want the big agency and lots of staff and so forth. But I think they really liked the customised approach to what I was doing, the fact that I would sort of be able to come in on a project, leverage it for them, get them some results. And if they wanted to sort of have a few months break in the early days, that was fine. I was much more flexible perhaps than a more traditional public relations agency where it's about 12-month retainers, definitely signing up for the long haul and hoping that it actually works out as a business relationship.
So you've turned what was possibly a negative into something which is a big positive for your business.
Absolutely, and I think I've kind of grown from that. And I now these days don't do so many PR campaigns. It's much more about the strategic role I can play with clients. I come in maybe at a crisis level or when they're halfway through a campaign that's not going so well and give them the advice and the tools and techniques to move forward. But certainly I feel like a lot of my clients have stayed with me for the past 8 years, and that's been fantastic.
And for people watching at home, you've got 2 children. Tell us a little bit about family life.
So family life is busy. I have 2 boys, aged 2 and 6, and a husband who's very supportive. So I'm very lucky. I do feel like a lot of women in business will often say, well, I don't know how you actually do it with the children. And I do have a tip. I say marry the right person or be with the right person that supports your goals, and also just be flexible. I mean, there's been times I've taken my business down and had a few months break with my second child coming in 2013 and then sort of gone back into the business and grown it a lot now that the children are getting older.
So it's interesting that we can almost draw a line in the sand. When the second child was born, that's when Bespoke Communications really changed gears.
It did. It allowed me that breathing space. I launched my first book at 2013 in a very deliberate fashion. I wrote it when I was pregnant and I launched it a couple of months after the birth of the baby. The idea being is that I was still present. I was still marketing myself to clients and would-be clients while I was taking a break. And it really, for me, was the turning point. Working out exactly what my sweet spot was and the idea that, well, now I can reset this. Now I can really have the confidence. The book did really well and so many people came to me as a result of it. It really, for me, confirmed that I did have the capacity to grow without having to have a lot of staff, fancy offices and that kind of traditional agency growth, which a lot of my competitors would definitely have taken.
So was that a very specific decision that you made to go, you know what, I don't want the big offices, I don't want lots of staff? Was that something that was always at the forefront of your mind, or did you always think, oh, you know, bigger picture, maybe I would like to have that nice office and the hundreds of staff? What was the thinking behind that?
I think the challenges of having a young family, I did think it would be so great if I had more staff. So these days I do have an assistant and I have freelance staff and I also contract writers and journalists when I do my training modules to work with me, but that's in a very flexible capacity. And to be honest, I did actually dabble with the idea. I did have an office for a while and I did have a whole bunch of staff on contracts, and it was really an experiment to see, well, what am I in this business for? And I think what I missed most was the client interface. So managing people wasn't something I wanted to do in a long-term capacity. So running a business, really, once you sort of start having staff, it's all about keeping the payroll going, getting all workers good work because you need to pay the bills. And I really felt like that wasn't where my heart was. And so, to be honest, long-term, that wasn't going to be the business path for me.
Okay, so let's move into our first point. So as people at home know, we have 5 different points that have contributed to you doubling your turnover within the last 2 years. And number 1 is actually really interesting. It's fewer clients.
Indeed.
Fewer clients. Okay, explain.
So fewer clients. The idea was that 8 years ago when I launched, it was very much, I was a freelancer. And so all little bits of work, can you just edit this 250-word document? Can you do this website copy? It was bits and pieces of work. But what I worked out pretty quickly after a couple of years is there was no pipeline. There was no ongoing business. So I'd finish a project and then I'd be having to drum up new business. The idea that I work with fewer clients but provide more services to them means that I can actually get my hours down and my profits up. And it's been a really interesting experiment in many ways, which I didn't know if that was going to work. But, you know, some of my clients, they might come to me for media training And then they say, oh, you also do presentation skills. Can you come and do a keynote with us? Can you also perhaps look at just doing a website audit of what we need to be doing next? So really for me, that's adding value. So long term, I have repeat business. And as well as doing new business development, I just have that cash flow, which is quite stable.
So when you kind of think about, having fewer clients, was that a specific point in time where you made the decision and you went from more clients, you just fired half of your clients, or did you slowly get rid of them? How did that look?
I think the birth of the second child was a good point. So I knew I was winding down towards the end of 2012. I was collaborating with a couple of agencies, and some of those clients I felt would be a better fit for the other agencies. So I actually brokered a deal where I actually sold, if you like, some of the clients to other agencies where I felt like, well, I'm taking a 5 months break. I'm not going to be here to service this account. Here's someone else fantastic. If this works, here's a deal for you. So really it was a bit of a strategic move, but it was also an experiment. Like most things, until you do it, you never know how it's going to go. And it just meant I kept the clients I really wanted to work with, because I think working with great people, then you do your best work. And so for me, it's all about the relationships with the clients.
Okay, I can see people at home with their minds ticking over here. They're like, hang on a second, this is a win-win-win-win-win scenario. Win in that you were able to move on the clients that weren't your biggest profit or the clients you wanted to work with the most. 2, those clients weren't just left in the lurch, they were moved on to another agency which you respected and had an agreement with. 3, they're getting additional work. And 4, there's a kickback in it for you as well.
Absolutely. And I guess some of those clients, they still engage me to do the training component, maybe a couple of times a year. But I definitely don't handle the day-to-day PR running of the account.
Would you have done that earlier, knowing today what you know about the outcome of that process?
To be honest, I don't think I could have. When I started my business, it was during the GFC. And so in many ways, I was picking up the scraps of work, if you like. The big agencies were being fired because big clients didn't have the money. So in some ways, I had to keep my costs low, be nimble, be flexible and adaptable. Whereas I think 2012, 2013, I was really able to say, look, we're in a different mode now. There's more stability. And I felt more confident to call the shots in some ways.
Did you also feel, was there any feeling of awkwardness in, moving those clients on, or how did that process look?
Look, there were some clients who wanted to then find their own agency and they weren't particularly interested in the introductions that I made, and that was really up to them. So it was very much, look, I'll do the introduction. If it works, we broker a deal, excellent. If not, it's been great working with you, but it's time to part company.
And was there any specific details when you looked at some of these businesses that you did want to part company with? Was there any specific details you were looking at? Was it spreadsheets? Was it profit and loss? Was it time that you were spending? What was it specifically that made you decide on those particular businesses?
So sometimes it's about over-servicing, which is a big one in PR. So they pay you a certain amount of billable.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.